Hi folks, welcome to fishingvermont.net. My name is Bob. Today we're going to talk about tubes, more specifically tubes for bass fishing. Tubes have been around for a long time. Some people have used them for a long time. I've used them for the last 10, 12 years. Some people have never heard of them, surprisingly enough. They're a very effective bait. They're probably the most versatile bait you can have in your tackle box and in your boat. Really something everyone should have. And if you're a smallmouth fisherman, especially, if you're not fishing tubes, if you don't have them in your boat, you're really missing out. They give you a lot of options. They're, like I said, they're very versatile. So today I'm going to try to go over a little bit. Those who fished them before, maybe I can show you something new. And those who haven't fished them before, maybe I can show you how to fish them and get you on some more fish. So what's a tube? Well, it's a soft plastic bait. It's a fairly hollow tube. It's got a solid end on it for the head, and it's got tentacles. It's mostly mimics the crayfish. The smaller tubes will mimic minnows and insects, things like that. So right here, that's a tube. They come in different sizes. Like I said, the tubes that I'm going to be showing you today are made by Mismo. I'm not showing you these because I'm pro staff for Mismo. I am, but I've used Mismo baits for 7 or 8 years before I was pro staff for them, and I used them because they were the best on the market, and that's the reason I'm talking about today. That I'm not going to rep a bait. I'm not going to promote a bait that doesn't work. I like to catch fish. I certainly want you to catch fish. So there's a lot of reasons I use the Mismo baits. First one is durability. They are a durable enough rubber that they last a fairly long time. You can catch a lot of fish on them, so you get a lot of your money's worth there. They're still a soft enough rubber so that when the fish pick them up, they don't drop them. It's not a hard bait in their mouth. It doesn't feel weird. So they tend to hold on to the baits. So those are two definitely good points of it. And the third, and I think the biggest point with the Mismo baits, is the colors. They come in a phenomenal amount of colors, and the colors are amazing. They got the best colors and best color combinations of anybody that makes tubes. Seems like tubes are kind of an afterthought for other companies, and for Mismo, it's where they thrive. It's their prime soft plastic. They make other soft plastics, but when you think Mismo, you got to think they're tubes, because that's where they're super strong in the market. Where others it's kind of a side market for them. So I'm going to go over some of the different things here. This is the Ish tube from Mismo. This is a 7-inch tube. So they come in larger one. This is for guys fishing for the big largemouth bass, or you can use them for pike or stripers, things like that. This is more of a standard 4-inch tube. 3.5 to 4-inch tube is kind of the standard tube for bass fishermen. If you look through a tackle box of a guy who fishes for bass and he uses tubes, you're generally going to find those 3.5 to 4-inch tubes in there. This is another tube that Mismo makes. This is their teaser tube. This one is 2.5 to 2 3/4, depending on which teaser you get. These are great tubes when the fish are negative or neutral. They want a little bit smaller presentation. It's not always a big bait for big fish. Sometimes an elephant wants a peanut. The smaller bait will get you fish when the fish are a little negative or a little neutral, or they want a smaller profile because that's what they're feeding on. So that's another option. And then the other tubes are the micro tubes, which are used for panfish. They're great. They're 1.5 to 1 3/4. They're great. I use them through the ice for ice fishing. I use them in the summer for crappie and for perch and things like that. Great option. So they come in a lot of different sizes, a lot of different colors. They're like I said, just from that point alone, they're a very versatile bait. But they can be rigged a lot of different ways too, which gives you more combinations. Standard way to rig a tube, the most popular way is with a tube jig. You can see right here what this looks like. This is a slightly larger weight than what's in here. This is just easier for you to see on camera. So what happens is you slide the tube jig into the tube because it's hollow, and then you push the tube, the head of the eyelet through the head of the tube here. So basically you tie on up top, and what this does, it keeps your hook up top, and as you're fishing, you tend not to get any snags because your hook's up where obviously can be out of the snags. So what happens is you're gonna pull this through the water, and it's gonna kind of give you a glide motion through the water. Another way you can rig it is with a standard jig head, just your plain old jig head. You'd put a curly tail grub on, or sometimes you put a minnow on, or things like that. And what you do is just run the hook through the tip of the head, right through the hollow part of the body, and back up through. And what this does, it gives you a slightly different presentation than this one. This one, your weight is kind of midway through the tube, so you'll get a gliding action. You'll get more of a horizontal presentation. With this one, almost all your weight is at the tip. So what happens here is when you lift, you'll get a vertical lift, and then you'll get a drop. So you get a much more vertical presentation with this one, and a more horizontal presentation with this one. So you can use the same tube, just two different jig heads, and you can get completely different presentation depending on what the fish want. And ultimately, that's what we got to give them, is what they want. So those are two different styles. A variation on the standard jig head is right here. This is a flasher jig made by Real Bait and Tackle, and it gives you an advantage over the standard jig head. So what this does is that you can get some color. This one is a transparent one. It's a kind of a chrome color, so you can get a little more flash of color there. But they make them in white, and they make them in green and black and pink and fire tiger, and you name it. There's a lot of different colors and different weights. So you can add a little flash of color to the tube that you're using, and to mix things up a little bit. The other advantage is you add a little flash with the blades on it. They have the standard silver blades, and they also have red blades. You can add some flash to the lure when you're pulling it through the water. So you have that option. You get flash, and you also get some vibration from the blade. The other thing you get is clicking from this blade, and what that does is it'll mimic a crayfish. Crayfish clicks their claws; they make that noise in the water. This will help mimic that sound, so you can pull fish in. They may not see it, but they can hear that. They can feel the vibration of the blade, and they can hear that clicking. It'll pull fish in, and sometimes trigger fish that may be negative or neutral. So this is a great option. These have been really hot lately. Been written up in Fisherman, other magazines, and some of your more famous fishermen like Gord Fizer uses these. They're a great bait to have, a great a jig head to have. They work great for walleye too, rip jigging and things like that. So above the standard jig, this Real Bait and Tackle flasher jig is a great option, because it gives you more bang for your buck, I think, on that. Another way you can rig on a tube jig, on a regular standard jig, is take your jig and hook it through the very tip of the tube. And a lot of guys fishing walleye will do this with minnows. And what this does, and you can see from the video here, it gives you extra movement. You may be tied on this line, and you don't get as much movement with some of these other styles, but this will swivel, and you get a different presentation. And this may be what triggers the fish that day. So with three different jig heads here, you can get multiple presentations with a few different colors. The combination is huge, and gives you a lot of options. Another way, drop shotting was big a few years ago. It's still used a lot. Most guys use worms and smaller baits for drop shotting. Not a lot of guys use tubes. These teaser tubes are great for drop shotting. Standard drop shot hook here. Your bait is horizontal. You can keep your bait in the fish's face for a longer period of time. If the fish are negative, neutral, they've been fished a lot, their mouths are sore, they've seen a lot of lures, you got a cold front coming through, or the water's cold, any of those things where the fish may not take a bait that's moving quickly. This drop shot option keeps the bait in their face longer, and you can trigger fish that may not be chasing as much. So it's another great option to have. People drop shot all the time, so adding a tube to it, it's another great option here. The last way that you can rig them, or there's many ways to rig them, but the last way that I rig them, this is weedless. It's a standard extra wide gap worm hook. This is a Gamakatsu 4/0. You run the tip of the hook through the head of the tube and back out the back like you would a soft plastic jerk bait, or any tubes or any soft plastic you rig weedless. And what this does, it gives you a weedless presentation, and then when the fish go to bite it, these tubes are fairly soft and they're hollow, so they squeeze down, and that really exposes the hook, and you get great hook sets with it. So that's a great option for weedless. and for largemouth bass, and believe it or not, smallmouth bass. I find that the combination of rock and weed for smallmouth bass is the best. I get my best fish there. So that's a great option. And guys will Carolina rig this or Texas rig this. It works really well. If you don't want a Texas rig or Carolina rig, but you still want some weight to it, this right here is an extra wide gap worm hook, but this has a keel weight on it. So this will fish a little bit differently. You can still fish it weedless like the other ones. They push down well. You can also fish this like a jerk bait in the spring and the fall. Works great. You can, like I said, you can fish it like a jerk bait. You get that darting motion with it. It'll rise and fall and dart. So this will really trigger bites. So we've gone over sizes and jig presentations. I'm going to go over a few colors. They come in, especially from Ismo, in dozens and dozens of different colors, and based on where you're fishing and what you have for bait, and you can pick different colors. I'm going to give you some basic colors. If I had to have 5 of these things in my tackle box and only 5, what would I pick no matter where I was fishing? First one would be green pumpkin. My buddy Tom, that's his favorite color. It's one of my definitely favorite colors. It does mimic a crayfish. There's a lot of that green pumpkin color on crayfish in most lakes. So it's a great color to have. It's definitely one you want to keep rigged up in your boat. Another color I use, I probably use this more than green pumpkin. This is the Wichita Special from Ismo. It's kind of a burnt orange and olive color with green flake, blue flake, red flake in it. It's a glittery. It's a nice bait. It mimics crayfish when they're in that reddish stage. I think it works great. I use this a lot. I caught a lot of big smallmouth, 20-inch plus smallmouth on these. So great bait to have. Another one that I use quite often is white, and people think white. White is a standard. You really should have this on your boat. It works great, especially on those bright sunny days. It works well for smallmouth. I can't explain it. Actually, white tubes work great for lake trout as well. If you're ice fishing for lake trout, I don't think anything works better than a white tube. So it's a great bait to have. The third one I carry a lot and I use a lot. This one here is it's reddish black, and it's dark red or it's light black, whatever you want to call it. It's got blue, red, and green flake in it, and on the bottom it's got it's bright blue with blue flake in it. This works really well. I'm not sure if it's due to the alewives in Champlain or what, but bass will trigger on this. I always keep one of these rigged up as well. The last one I use is right here. This is one of the teaser tubes. This is red ear sunfish. It looks a lot like a sunfish. It's got the green and the orange, and it's got some flake in it for a little bit of reflection, a little bit of glitter. It works really well. It looks crayfish, pumpkin seed, bluegill kind of color. So it works great. And like I said, it's a little bit smaller presentation. So some days, they want a little bit smaller bait. So that one's a great one to have. So we've covered our sizes, our hardware, our colors. The next thing I want to cover is the poles you want to use. Tubes are essentially primarily a spinning rod setup. They're a lighter bait. They're a finesse bait. You tend to want to run them on a spinning rod. The ish tube, you run a bigger, heavier jig head in it. You could throw it on a bait caster. But generally, for the most part, it's a spinning rod setup. I run spinning rods, medium action, fairly fast action. Medium weight, fairly fast action, and I run Power Pro braided line, and I run a fluorocarbon leader. I tend to run a double uni knot between the Power Pro and the fluorocarbon. There's a lot of different knots you can use for that, whatever works for you. For the fluorocarbon, I run anywhere from 8 to 12 pound test in the spring. I run a little bit heavier line in the fall, mostly because the locations that I'm fishing for the smallmouth tend to have a lot of pike in them in the fall, and I'll lose a lot of baits if I run that lighter line for the most part. So I'll run 17 pound fluorocarbon in the fall, unless the fish are not super active, and I'll drop down to a lighter line, and if I need to trigger some fish and they're a little more line sensitive. So So that's it for as far as the hardware. Well, one more thing. When you're buying your hardware and you're buying your jigs, make sure to buy quality jigs. It doesn't matter who you get them from. You know, these jig heads are the tube jigs. Like here, I buy these from Mismo. I get these from Mismo. They use Gamakatsu hooks. They're high quality. You know, they stay sharp. They work really well. For the weedless, these are Gamakatsu as well. These are 4/0. You know, they're good hooks, and then you know the real bait ones, they use their quality hooks as well. Don't buy cheap hooks, just or cheap jig heads. Just don't do it. It's not worth losing a fish of a lifetime, and honestly, you'll catch more fish with a quality hook. You're gonna save a couple pennies buying the cheap ones. It's not worth the money. Just spend the money on a couple extra dollars and buy the quality jig heads, and you'll catch more fish, and you'll be less frustrated. So you know, definitely want to do that. So that's the end of the hardware side of it. As far as how you fish them, you can't fish them wrong. I don't think you can fish them wrong. As long as the tube is in the water, you can catch fish on them. You can fish them weedless, like I said there. You can fish them like a jerk bait, like you would in the spring or in the fall in the shallow water. What I do a lot is I will stroll them. I will reel them slowly across the bottom, or I'll use my boat when we're drifting and covering structure. We'll drift over the top of structure, and we'll pull them along and give them a little pop once in a while. You can rip jig them. You can swim them like you would swim a bass jig. You know, you can do a lot of different things with it. You can vertical jig them. No matter which way I jig them, I tend to, once I get them to my boat, I'll keep them close to the bottom, and I'll vertical jig them for 10-15 seconds, just to pick up some of those fish that followed, and they may not have committed right away. So that's a good tip to have. Like I said, you fish them multiple ways. Where jigs, tubes, they shine. They do work well in the spring. They do work well in the fall. But where they really, I think they excel is midsummer. You know, when your buddies are out, trying to get that spinnerbait bite up shallow, and they're fishing in, 4 to 6 feet of water, and they're catching, 10, 12-inch smallmouth. And you decide to push out deeper, and you're fishing, 12 to 25, 30 feet of water with a tube jig, and you're catching 17, 18, 20-inch smallmouth. It's a huge difference. I mean, you got to fish where the fish are, and these tubes let you get down deeper and fish areas that you couldn't with other baits. They allow you to fish in the wind. You get real high wind, it's tough to fish. Something other than a spinnerbait or something you're cranking through the water. It's hard to fish top water. It's hard to fish. Your soft plastic finesse baits. You're not going to throw a Senko in high wind and fish it effectively. These work great in high wind. They cast a long ways. You can cover a huge area with them. You can fish them fast to cover a lot of area, or you can fish them slow and keep them in the strike zone longer. It really is a great bait. So I think I covered most everything today. I encourage you to try Mismo baits, Mismo tubes, and like I said, with the real bait and tackle, those flasher jigs, those are great to have. I encourage you to buy some of those and try them. I'm sure you'll be happy with them. I'm sure you'll catch a lot of fish with them. I encourage you to buy them from your local tackle shop if you can. Those guys are around when you need them. When you need bait in the morning, or you need something, buy it local if you can. If you can't get them local, ask if you can. They'll order them in for you. If they can't, get them online. Go to Mismo.com or go to Real Bait and Tackle and order them online. That way you can get any color you want, any size you want. The tubes there's hundreds of colors and tubes. There's dozens of combinations of the flasher jigs, colors, shank size, blade type, things like that. So I think that about covers it. Hopefully that helped. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the video section. If you want, you can also email me. My email address is bob@fishingvermont.net. I'll do my best to answer your questions. So hopefully this helped, and hope you do well fishing. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.